starting recording now.
Okay, cool. So let's do, obviously you can see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a quick tour of the current test organization we have in Secure. So as the architecture is organized in two distinct parts, the first one being what we call today the analyzer, which are small wrapper project that we maintain on top of open source or licensed scanners that are external software or in-house software that actually do the scanning. We wrap that into our analyzer project so that we can handle input, normalize the input and normalize also the output into the common JSON formats and run that within the CI jobs. And those are outputting reports as JSON artifacts that then get processed by the Rails backend. So we have those two main parts, the analyzers and the Rails backend. And this is also why we have kind of two different testing approaches. Everything that is Rails feature get tested the usual Rails way with the aspect testing, the unit testing, controller testing, API, everything that is usual to the Rails application. And I won't say they are fully end-to-end tests because the complexity is to have a full end-to-end test. It requires a more complex setup because you need to have the pipeline running. You need to get access to the external Docker images to download them and run the analyzers, the scanners, and it takes more time, etc., etc. So it's doable, I think, and it will be, I think, your job to define whether or not it's relevant to have everything done within the same QA framework tied to the Rails application. But what we did on the other side right now is we have a set of test project, which is under security product / test, which are following a convention defined into the common project here. So common is showing the documentation about our test project, how you set them up, or you create a new one. There is a template that can use to create a new test project, for example. And the purpose is we set up one test project usually per language, package manager, or framework, because this is trying to map what would be a real project for a customer. Let's say I have a JavaScript project using the Yarn package manager. We should have a corresponding JS ER test project, for example. And this project will be implementing, including the vendor template and has all the compatible security features enabled. So here we have dependency scanning and license scanning enabled, for example. And so you can set up, etc., etc. And the way it's working is we are doing a diff between what the pipeline will output after running the scans and some expectations that we have within the Git repository. So we have this folder, which is QA/expect, and then we have each different report type. So if I look at the dependency scanning reports, this is what the pipeline job should output by running the feature on that specific project. So basically, this is run once, you save that into the repository, and then you're leveraging a shared config that is our QA definition here, which is basically adding some QA jobs that will do kind of a diff. Just let me find that quickly. Looks like this has changed a lot since I last looked at this. So we now have exported the comparison logic to a shell script. So it might be even, oops, sorry. So we have the CI templates project where we store a lot of shared configuration for our analyzers and for the QA. So if I look at the script now that do the comparison because the comparison logic has evolved a lot in the past weeks and months. So basically what it takes is the expectations, compare that. It used to be a simple diff, but now I think we are using GQ. Yeah, we are using GQ and try to apply some more smarter comparison between the two reports, but this is essentially what we are doing here. So going back to a pipeline, for example. So if I'm looking at the master branch pipeline, we are running the usual jobs, which are triggered by including the vendor template. So here we have dependency scanning and license scanning running. And then we have a QA stage where we will be running specific jobs. So here we have QA for dependency scanning and we have QA for license scanning. And at the end of the job, so this job is taking the output from the previous one. So here, dependency scanning will create an artifact, and QA dependency scanning one will, this is why it's a separate stage, because you will retrieve that artifact, compare it, and if this is exactly the same, or at least if it's matching according to the comparison logic we have for this specific kind of reports, it will pass. If it's not the case, it will fail. So the QA job here will fail, it will fail the pipeline, and it will tell us that the QA is not working. Initially, we used to trigger this test project independently, but what we've done recently is integrate that directly into the analyzer's pipeline using the downstream pipelines, which is very handy. So if I look, for example, I'll take a simple one, bundle audit analyzer. If I look at the CI YAML configuration, we see that here we have defined one specific QA job, which is for the Ruby bundler test project. So what it says is, take that project, which is a specific, a specific test project, that has been created for Ruby language and with the bundler package manager, and trigger a pipeline on that project when you are running a pipeline on the analyzer. So every time someone is putting changes into that analyzer, it will automatically execute a downstream pipeline on this test project to verify that we're not breaking anything. So here you have some steps that are part of the specific analyzer testing, building it, testing, linting, etc., etc. And then we have a downstream stage where we will be triggering specific test projects. So here we have the Ruby bundler one, which you can see is triggering a downstream pipeline on this specific test project. So this is what we are doing right now. It's for dependency scanning, container scanning. SAS is currently moving to that. I think it's close to be done, or it's just done. But it was really an ongoing work. So this ensures that we test all the compatible languages with every specific project that, this is the complexity of our features, is because we are supporting a broader, a huge amount of different languages that might be specific setup for each of them. It's currently not perfect because we are just testing on the master branch, if I'm not mistaken. But in the test project, we might have multiple branches, which are called the freeze one. So this is a convention that we set up, like if you want to test specifically for auto DevOps or for non-Docker in Docker, we have dedicated branches, which are with a freeze suffix. And this contains specific configurations. So for example, this is for auto DevOps. So as you can see, there is no GitLab CI YAML file. So this is to make sure that this, if you have a Ruby bundler project, it works out of the box with auto DevOps. And here it's a specific configuration for non-Docker in Docker. So they should be here, the dependency scanning disabled Docker in Docker set to true. So we have some specific branches like that test specific cases, specific configurations, but they are not yet triggered dramatically from the upstream scanner. So we still have some blind spots. We are constantly trying to improve that process, but this is where we are right now. So what we are doing also is in the monthly release process, we have one release issue that we create. So this is an example for 12.10. and there is a small script that triggers pipelines on all the QA projects. So this is what what is the output of that command. So it's triggering, as you can see, tons of different pipelines on all the compatible test projects. But again, this is going to be replaced by this downstream QA approach, because instead of doing this once a month, we will do it, well, every time we need to apply changes to the analyzers. And since the analyzers are on a CD, continuous deployment process, it doesn't make sense to wait the end of the month to test that fully. So again, this is still ongoing, but it's a bit obsolete. We will remove that one.
So those kickoff of all the analyzers, is that a very manual step then? Does somebody have to go through and start each pipeline individually, or do you have a script that can go off and start everything?
We have this script right now for the.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
This is a very simple one. Key trigger here. It's basically looping through a list of a YAML file containing all the compatible test project and triggering the corresponding pipeline. It's on the master branch by default. So again, we'll still have this blind spot. We were thinking about having a recurring job, also testing all the different branches. But usually, yeah, it used to be very manual testing. And what we used to do also with the test project is having some long-running merge requests. I will take a look at just here again, because maybe, yeah, it's another one, so it probably has some. Yeah, we have this kind of merge request that we're used to do some manual check on the merge request widget, for example, or have a look at the pipeline view and see how the race feature we are still working and not broken. And well, we moved out from this and replaced them with great end-to-end testing and UI testing within the race application itself. So basically, what this tests are kept for right now is making sure that the analyzer is generating the expected reports. And then everything that goes on the race application that starts from parsing that report is handled differently, because in the race application, we have fixtures files. So in the GitLab project, we have fixtures like SAST reports. Should be called GeoSAST report, something like that. Okay, I'm not 100% sure I will find that cleanly. Just let me switch to my IDE to find that file. And open that. So here, for example, in the fixture folder, we have some JSON reports, which are basically the equivalent of what you can find in the QA expect folder on the test projects. And this is what we use to do the testing on the race side, mostly for the end-to-end testing. So, yep.
Sorry, I was going to ask, do you find that these JSON files, the expected outputs, do you find that would they ever change when perhaps, say, a analyzer or a scanner, perhaps the message changes, or severity changes, etc.? Would you find there would be a lot of flux in this, where there's a lot of maintenance overhead?
Yeah, and this is the main reason why the comparison logic has evolved into something more sophisticated, into that script here, because it used to be a very simple diff between the two files. But for example, in the dependency scanning world, things might evolve a lot. So for the exact same setup project, so you have one dependency, you've been using that exact same version, you don't change anything for months, but well, one day someone discover a vulnerability on one of those dependencies. So you change nothing to your project, but now you have a new vulnerability. So by running the pipeline again, the scanner will find a new vulnerability on the existing project. So it will fail because your expectation doesn't contain it. So we had to manually check every failing QA jobs and find if the difference was a relevant one. For example, we added a new vulnerability in our database, so it's not being reported into that project. Okay, this is legitimate. And we have, to ease a bit that step, we have an update manual job. So here we have update QA dependency scanning, which is a manual job that will automatically helps you creating a merge request. So if you look here, you have so the dependency scanning job, the QA dependency scanning job, and then you have here a manual one, which is update QA for dependencies. It's a manual one, and what this is doing, if you trigger that, I won't do it here, but if you trigger that, it will create a new commit, push that into the new branch, and create a new merge request to update automatically that for you. So we might have some, as an example here, update QA, update expected reports. I don't see automated one because this is no one, but basically this would what the bot would create an issue, a merge request with that kind of changes, like, you know, adding new vulnerabilities, changing things, etc., etc. The problem is what I described was a very simple and legitimate use case to update them, but on top of that, we have very I would say annoying updates to make, like when we add non-consistent order, doing some changes in the analyzer will trigger a different order in the output, which makes a diff that is very hard to understand. And this is why sometimes we have also changed a bit the comparison logic to verify that, well, we don't have regression, but we don't fail the job if there is new vulnerabilities. We have that kind of tuning. I don't remember exactly everything we're doing into that comparison script. That might be something we should document probably to help you dig into that further, but we have some tuning. I know, for example, that for container scanning, it often happens to have new vulnerabilities happening. Another thing that we did recently to mitigate that a bit is to try to pin the vulnerability database that we are using. So we are now able to tell, well, for dependency scanning, use that specific version of the database. So until we upgrade that manually, we should have always the same output. If we don't, then there's probably a bug in what we shipped, in the changes we ship in the analyzer. The problem is now we need to have a monthly task to kind of update that, to make sure we stay up to date and to have regression over time for the new vulnerabilities that have been added into those databases. Yeah, that makes sense to you?
Yeah, it answers my question. Thank you.
So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, I'm sorry, it's not something that I prepared in advance, but yeah, first looking at this test command will help you have a better overview about this, and yeah, this should explain a lot about this this approach. Yes, so for the future, one thing that we might consider is whether or not we want to keep those two different approaches. From my perspective, I think it's great. This analyzer focus testing is great because it's running fast. It gives us very quick feedback, whereas the QA process within the RAISE application takes way longer to run. And it doesn't really make sense for us to have those side projects being autonomous, but have the QA being tied to the RAISE application. And this is even more true as we are trying to split a bit more this responsibility between the different teams, between secure and defend, for example, with the new vulnerability management category, which is handling most of the RAISE application features. So I think it still makes sense. The problem is the fixtures in the Rails application tend to be a bit stale because engineers working on the analyzers will be forced to update the expectation in the QA jobs because otherwise, well, it's failing. But it's not part of the process to backport those update expectation file into the Rails application. And one other reason is what we put into the Rails application is not exactly the same as what we have in the test project, because test project can contain a lot of vulnerabilities because it's supposed to like mimic a real project. Whereas in the Rails application, we might just add enough data to test what we want. So if, for example, if you want to test the merge request widget, we don't need to have hundreds of vulnerability. Just having a dozen of them will be enough, for example. So this might be another reason to keep them separate. But this is a good debate to have and see how we want to, where we want to go in the future. All right. Any other question about this testing organization?
No, there's a lot there actually already. I think I'd got the impression that from my perspective, it might have been more from the GitLab application side of things. And I think that's what you were sort of touching upon, you know, that we don't want duplication of effort where we have whole test suites within the test projects themselves, but also you know, duplicating and having these huge end-to-end tests within GitLab itself, the GitLab project. So I guess I need to think where the balance there should be.
Yeah, and one thing to consider, and that might change in the future, is so far everything happening in the Rails application was very generic. The way we design the architecture is we have different analyzer per language, per package manager, per scanning type, or report type like SAS, scanning, etc. And this was making sense because this needs to be very focused on these different types of analysis and the specificities of each project and language, etc. But once we put that data into the reports, they are following a common JSON report format and security report format, I think it's called right now, which is being defined by the new JSON schema that we have shipped recently. So once we put that into the JSON reports and it's getting passed into the Rails side, it's put into very generic structures. And so generic object, we have just one table in the database, for example, for all the findings, whatever the type, because they are full. I mean, everything that is attached to their behavior and the way we are managing them and interacting with them is a generic between all of them. There are only some specificities in the display, and so far it was very limited. So that's also why we don't need, for example, to have end-to-end testing on the Rails side and every feature in the UI and the management of the rarities that needs to be tested exhaustively for all the possible languages and package manager and things like that, because there's no differences. So this might change in the future as we get more specialized and improve different types of vulnerabilities, because each team, for example, the dynamic analysis team on the for the task vulnerabilities, they are enhancing the metadata by adding some request response metadata, like showing the header, showing what was the request that generate the issue. So there is a lot more specific data, and this might need more testing on the Rails side that would be specific to them. So this is where things might change a bit in the future.
I'm glad that there is value there to add the end-to-end tests for sure. Yeah, no, thank you for taking the time and taking me through that.
If you have any question, feel free to keep asking them. even in the secret Slack channel so that everyone can answer them. Because like a lot of things, they might be a bit obscure, a bit hidden into some readmes, into a hidden project. So it's hard to know everything. Just one final note on testing, because this is something that you're focusing on right now about the offline environment. If this is something that is attached to the Rails environment, it might be one use case where we need exhaustive testing per each language and package manager, because the way we need to configure the tools to support offline environment is very specific to each language and package managers, for example. So this would be an exception to what I was saying before.
Sure. I have a test. Well, when the merge request goes in, there will be a test scenario for the air gapped, and any test can be executed against that particular instance. So yeah, when end-to-end tests do come online, you know what, it would be interesting to run them against that particular scenario. Like you say, see what the differences are. Is there some test setup that needs to be added, or otherwise, yeah, what can be observed from it, I guess. Sure.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you.
Yeah,
Might cut the recording.